All right, let's do this. All right, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Ubers the Pits podcast. I'd like to introduce a guest and friend of mine, actually, I should say champion now, Sean Gibbons. Sean, thank you for joining us this week.
Happy to be here, Chris. Good to see you.
So as I start with every guest, I like to get their understanding of how they started in the industry and what they did to get to the point where they're at and what started them in motorsports.
I started working at a retail store right after college, and they sold car stereo and car performance parts, and I met a bunch of people that were really into sports car racing, some of which I'm really close friends with still today. And this is going back more than 30 years ago. We used to, cram a truck that was made for two. We'd jam 4 people in the cab and drive from New Jersey up to Lime Rock and camp out for the race weekends and watch, all these pro drivers that are, heroes to us at that point. And, spend the weekend, drive back late Sunday night because we had to be at work on Monday. And that built this passion for the sport. It's not that my family was in it or, anybody else I knew. But there's no way at that point, I was lucky if I could scrape together enough change to put gas in the car to make it to work, let alone go racing.
Yeah.
And so after working at Sirius XM, being one of the first 100 employees there and, spending 6 or 7 years working, 80, 90, 100 hours a week, traveling all over the world, never being home. When we started to make some money in 2006, I bought a 911 and, joined the Porsche club and started going to Porsche track days, their driver education events. And one of the guys I worked with, Chris Kretzmer from the retail store, was at that point working at Skip Barber, still works there, has been there, as long as I've been at Sirius or longer, and called him up and said, "Hey, I want to go learn to go racing." And so he got me set up at the Skip Barber School at Road Atlanta and drove MX-5s around Road Atlanta for 3 days. Our third day, it actually snowed. It was the first time it had snowed in Atlanta in like years. So imagine doing your practice starts coming down to turn 12 in the snow in MX-5 cars.
Oh, geez.
But I didn't go racing yet. It wasn't until my first son was born and I was going really fast in this 911 at a bunch of different racetracks, New Jersey Motorsports Park and Watkins Glen up because I lived in the Northeast. And I started thinking to myself, in New Jersey, I'm doing 165 down the front straight in a street car with 3-point belts. And if something goes wrong, it's probably not going to be a good thing.
Yeah.
So my answer to being more safe was to go build a race car.
I like that thinking and I like that philosophy. I'm going to have to try to use that on, trying to convince other people about it.
I was able to convince my wife it was a good idea. And so, friend of mine that owns a Porsche shop in New Jersey, Robbie Provost, helped me pick where I wanted to go. And I've been a Porsche fan for a long time. And there was this newish class called Spec Boxster. So, and by that time I'd met a number of pro drivers, right? So when I went to Skip Barber, my instructors were Brian Sellers, Spencer Pompelli, and Brian Christensen. So, could you think of, better people to be your instructors?
Exactly.
And so I called them and asked them, "Hey, if I'm going to go racing, what should I do?" And they all told me go spec. None of them cared which spec, right? Go spec racer Ford or spec Miata or whatever. Just make it about who can drive and not about who can spend the most money.
Yep.
And so I'm a big guy, right? You know me. I'm over 200 pounds. So I went and rented a spec Miata and got in this 98 horsepower car and thought, holy cow, I'm going to be at a massive disadvantage at 98 horsepower trying to haul my big rear end around.
Believe me, I know the feeling right now.
And so, and the Porsche thing, this new Spec Boxster class, it started in Texas and was just starting to grow around the country. And so Robbie helped me find a Boxster that we bought for $2,300, built it into a race car. And I went and did my first Porsche Club race in 2012. And out of a field, I can't remember exactly how many cars there were, 10 or 11 in class. I finished second, right? First time I ever raced a car competitively, and just kept building from there. But I had met Kevin Buckler through a mutual friend before I started racing. And it's a great story, actually. So I used
just
to
for
work.
people just so people can understand, Kevin Buckler is the owner of TRG Motorsports. He also has won the Daytona 24-hour and amongst many other races.
Yeah,
Le Mans,
won the Mans overall. I think the only time a GT car's won it overall.
Yep.
Super famous guy in sports car racing and a close friend of mine at this point. But then not at all, right? I was this really chubby kid driving spec Boxsters, or younger guy. And every time I'd win a race, I'd text him after having met him, say, I won here, I set a track record there, expecting one day he'd call me up and say, hey, here's a contract to come drive for TRG, right? How little I knew about how the sport worked back then.
But you were definitely dreaming.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people do when they go into it. But I ended up doing really well in Spec Boxster, and Kevin calls me one day and says, hey, he'd been the biggest privateer Porsche team for a long time. And I met him through a prior relationship when I ran a company called Precision Power. So if you're ever into car audio, I ran marketing and product and engineering for PPI before going to Sirius. And we made all the amps for Noel Lee, who owns Monster Cable's collection of exotic cars. And so I called Noel, who was a sponsor of TRG when Grand Am was coming to New Jersey for the first time, and said, hey, would you call Kevin and see if he'd have me out as a guest? And at this point I was working at Sirius. I said, but Noel, you have to tell Kevin, Sirius is never going to write him a check, right? We're not going to sponsor racing. Our CEO at the time was Mel Karmazin, totally against any of that. Since changed, right? Because our CEO now is the Meyer of Meyer Shank Racing. But back then wasn't going to happen. And, if Kevin's running a business, totally understand if he doesn't want to host me. But of course, Kevin said, come on out. And, driving for him at the time were Spencer Pompelli and Brian Sellers and Andy Lally, which of course I knew, Brian and Spencer from my race school. So I get to the track and he treats me like I'm their biggest sponsor. And he has the whole team lined up in front of the garages blocking the view of the cars. And he says, I have something to show you. And all the people step away and there is a Sirius logo down the entire side of the car. And I freak because I'm like, Kevin, Noel told you we're not going to sponsor you. And he said, yeah. He said, I didn't have a title sponsor for the second car. And since you were so honest, I just had the logos made and put them on there. And so Kevin and I have been friends ever since then. And he called me one day after I'd been texting him all these race wins and stuff and said, hey, we're going to test these new Aston Martin GT4 cars and GT3 cars since I'm now Aston Martin Racing North America at Sebring. Are you interested in coming to test? And I said, well, Kevin, I can't pay. I don't have any money to do this stuff at that level. And he said, no, just come down and I'll sneak you into the car in between other people that are paying because there's always time available.
Yeah.
At this point, I'd done like 6 races in a 200 horsepower spec Boxster, right? And so I go, of course, I'll come down. So I fly down to Sebring. I've never seen Sebring. I don't know which way the track goes. I've never driven anything other than a 200 horsepower spec Boxster.
So you didn't realize that you have to have a chiropractor on standby and have to wear a mouth guard driving around Sebring.
Yeah. And, I show up there and Derek DeBoer's there and Lou Gelati and, a whole host of other people that have a lot more experience than I do, Chris Wilson. And the first day I never get in the car, right? So, here I am frustrated. I flew down to Sebring, Florida and sat around for a day. Second day, Kevin gets me in the car and I'm terrible. I have no idea which way the track goes. And if you've driven Sebring, right, it's 17 turns, it's bumpy, it's really not an easy one to memorize. And in a car I've never seen before, right?
Well, let me just put it, so you saw that, Porsche's coming out with the Carrera Cup USA next year, right?
Yep.
Did you see their very first race is Sebring?
Yep. Which I love.
Sebring is one of my favorite tracks, like I said, but you have to have a chiropractor on, standby, as well as wearing a mouth guard in the car.
Yeah, it's definitely bumpy. And so, long story short, by the second day I got in the car, the third day of the test, I was clicking off pretty good laps, so good that the last session I come in, I got within a reasonable distance of Chris Wilson's time, who put it on the pole for the IMSA race. Kevin stops me as I'm getting out of the car and he goes, "Dude, you're scaring me." And I said, "Scaring you? Why?" "I didn't go off. I didn't spin." He goes, "You're going fast." And I looked at him and said, "Yeah, I thought that was the point." So, we went from there and I met this guy, Carlos Yepes. What a great person, right? You talk about these kind of magic things that happen in your life. And he was one of the guys who owned one of the Astons that I was driving. And he's a commercial real estate developer in Florida. He and his wife are just amazing people, and his whole family. And his daughter was there with their little grandkids. And at that point, I had little kids that came to racetracks, but their grandkids are about the same age as mine at the time, maybe 3 and 5 or something like that. They didn't have any hearing protection. Like, it just wasn't something that, people thought about the first time they came to the racetrack. And I felt really bad. So I went on Amazon and I ordered the same hearing protection I bought for my kids. It was like $20. And I had it delivered and handed it to them the next day and didn't think anything of it other than, hey, now those 2 little kids weren't uncomfortable all day.
And they're going to actually enjoy watching the cars go around.
Yeah. And then a few months later, right around February, I get a phone call from Carlos. And he says, "Hey, Sean, my friend, are you coming down to the St. Pete Grand Prix?" Carlos lives in St. Petersburg. And I said, hey, I thought about it, but I didn't make any plans. He says to me, "Well, I have a room for you. Come on down." I said, "Okay, sure." And he says, "And I'm going to enter my car in the race." And I said, "Oh, congratulations, Carlos." And he says, "No, you don't understand. I want you to come drive it." So, when you talk about having no business doing, of course I said yes, right?
Why would you say no?
Yeah, right. And, I'm all excited and I call Brian Sellers and say, "Hey, Brian, I'm going to go do my first pro race in this guy's Aston in St. Petersburg." And, he's like, "Oh, that's great. Blah, blah, blah. I'm sure you'll do good." Yeah. So I fly down there. Now, St. Pete, it's a road course. There's no
runoff.
There's no runoff. There's no simulator to practice it. There isn't one available. It's not on iRacing. It's not on any of the video games, right?
The wall's, inches away from the car around every churn out.
And it's done in conjunction with IndyCar, so there's almost no track time.
Yep.
So, I show up, it's Pirelli World Challenge GTS, and it's a big field of, Pierre Kleinubing's in the, there's big name drivers in this field. Yeah. And at this point, I have a total of maybe 40 minutes in an Aston GT4 at Sebring, and have done 6, amateur spec Boxster races. And so
you're already qualified for your FIA Gold license.
Yeah, exactly. That was the other thing. I had to get an FIA license like in the matter of 10 days because he called me 10 days before the race. And so fly down there. I go through the first practice. I'm terrible. I just don't want to, I can't afford to pay to fix this guy's $250,000 Aston, right? So I'm driving so cautious because there's concrete walls everywhere. I think I qualified second to last, out of like 20 cars, I'm 19th. And in race 1, I go from 19th to 9th, and get the hard charger award. And I was such a geek, like literally as I was passing Pierre Kleinubing, I was on the radio. "Hey, I just passed Pierre Kleinubing," right? Somebody I had watched growing up. And then the second race, I finished 7th, but not the results Carlos was looking for. He thought I was going to win the races, right? Because I came close to Chris's time at Sebring.
Yeah.
But then I'd met Derek DeBoer there, and Derek, for those of you that don't know, has driven in IMSA and Super Trofeo and the SRO or World Challenge and GT4 America for a number of years, among other things, Formula Renault and a bunch of other things. And Derek and Kevin called me like 6 months later and said, "Hey, we're going to go race the Sprint X race in World Challenge at Circuit of the Americas. Would you like to do that with Derek? His other co-driver has some conflict." And so Derek and I went and did that race, and we won both races. We entered, as AM drivers, because we're both, classified as bronze on FIA. And we beat all the pro AMs and all the AMs. We won GT4 overall in both races, and was in the Aston, right? It was a kind of magical weekend for us. And so next season we're all hyped up, but I'm not one of these guys that writes a check. I do it all through sponsorship. So we do a lot of sponsorship development around and how do you raise money? How do you turn an ROI for the companies that are getting involved? Because it's not about, a sticker on the car. There's just not enough eyeballs in sports car racing for that to pay back.
Exactly. And I kind of want to get in that with you a little bit later too after this. So I want you to think about that, and we're going to bring it up a little bit later because that's a big point of what, I want my podcast and people to understand what is involved with racing.
Yeah, it's a huge portion. So I'll hold that till later. But, we went on the next year and TRG switched back to Porsche, and we were in a 981 GT4 Club Sport MR with the plan to run the whole season that year. And Derek and I got to drive the famous, TRG 66 numbered car, which is the one that, the number for TRG that's won Le Mans and the Rolex 24 and the IMSA and Grand Am championships overall. We'd never seen the car. We show up at COTA for the first race of the year, hadn't seen the car, hadn't been able to test it, practice it, anything else. And we finished fourth at COTA in both races. We go to VIR, and in the first race, Derek starts the race and gets crashed out of the race between the lower and upper S's. 125 mile an hour, somebody pit maneuvers him right at the bridge. It's straight. There's no reason to take the steering wheel. And literally afterwards, the car is totaled. It needs a tub. Thankfully, Derek's not hurt. And the guy that hit us, when we go into the stewards and, look at the video, and there's plenty of room, there's no reason for him to make contact. And the stewards ask him, "Why'd you move left into the back of of Derek's car?" And he said, "Well, when we got to the bridge, I got claustrophobic and moved left." And I couldn't hold my tongue. I said, "Other sports beckon." Really? Even if that's what happened, would you admit it?
Yeah, exactly.
But things happen. I mean, it's part of the sport, unfortunately. And, that's the other part people don't think about. You can have a big incident like that. And as AM drivers, we're on the hook to pay to fix the car.
Yeah.
And so it's another piece of that business side we can talk about later. So that really ended our championship run that season for us, because we didn't have a car until the end of the year. And we got teamed up, Derek and I did, with Spencer Pompelli, and we did the California 8-hour at Laguna Seca, which we finished second in GT4. We had the race won with like an hour and a half or 2 hours to go. We were up by 3/4 of a lap. We come in for a pit stop and it goes yellow, which is fine, except there was a little miscommunication and the pits got closed on the out when we were headed out to go back out on track, when a back marker was coming down onto the front straightaway, and it shouldn't have got closed till the pace car was in view, but they held us all the way and let the field come half a lap all the way down and then past us, and we had to go from the back all the way back to the front. And in Spencer's usual style, he was able to drive us from the back all the way back up to second place and finish 12 seconds off the win.
Wow.
Yeah, incredible job, but frustrating.
Yeah, I was at that because that was the very first 8 hours that they
Yep.
had in 2017.
Yep.
And yeah, it was definitely I'm sorry, 2018 was the first 8 hours.
2018. Yep.
And there's a lot to be learned of it. So, but a good, I mean, a good fun event for drivers. But I think that there's a lot of miscommunication between officials and track, and what really needed to happen. 2018 was a great event, but there's definitely a lot of miscommunication between the drivers and the teams and the track and the stewards, and it just kind of seemed like it was a little bit clustered. Series, it was a great run race. There's lots of teams from the world there. I definitely think there was a lot of miscommunication from track and stewards and officials on how things should have been done and run. I know there's like BOP issues with certain cars that showed up, but that's part of racing and what we got to deal with.
Yeah, and I think you have to give World Challenge and SRO a bit of wiggle room there, because it was the first time they were doing anything like that, and first time they were bringing the SRO people together with the World Challenge people.
Exactly.
And I thought they did a great job. I mean, I thought having as many international cars show up and compete, and the field that was there, it was I'm thrilled to have been able to be part of it. Like, I just feel lucky to be able to participate in it. And then the next season, as we look at that, as the first, SRO World Challenge, GT4 America Championship, Derek and I entered, they had an East Coast Championship and a West Coast Championship and a national. Back to that business side, I didn't have a budget to do the national, right? It's just too much money to raise.
Yeah.
So we entered East, Derek and I did, and Derek and Dr. Jim entered West, Jim Rappaport.
Yep.
And Derek and I couldn't have done East if Dr. Jim didn't let us use his car, right? I mean, it's this kind of fortuitous, the amazing people you meet in the sport, that, Dr. Jim lets Derek and I run his car in all the East Coast races while he and Derek use it in the West Coast races, driving for TRG. And the only race that was both East and West was Circuit of the Americas, my home track, my favorite place. So I didn't have a co-driver and I didn't have a car, but I wanted to go after this East Championship.
Yeah.
Having come from New Jersey, I called up Mike Bavaro and Jeff Abel at Body Motion and said, hey, you want to do a one race deal? Let's go do this, and I'll find a co-driver. And so I ran the Body Motion, came in at Circuit of the Americas, and was in that struggle to find a co-driver that could bring money, right? Because I can't afford to do it with the sponsors I have without the co-driver bringing money. And I thought I had another local Texas guy who was ready to go, who drove some this year with NOLA Sport with us, but he couldn't make that weekend work. And at the last minute, Al Carter jumps in the car with me. And, Al's won the Rolex 24, but still a bronze ranked driver. Such a talented guy, but, total wild man, if you know Al. And we go out and win the first race. And the second race, we were leading at the driver change, and Al had a shoulder problem, and we hadn't been able to practice driver changes quite as much as we'd like to because of his injury. And, we ended up falling back to fourth on a slow driver change. But man, Al did such a great job driving the car, and getting it up there. So, had a good start to the season. And then that year we drove a bunch of tracks I'd never seen before. I'd never been to Virginia International. I'd never been to Canadian Tire. I'd never been to Road America. So you want to talk about learning some big, iconic, fast, old school tracks in a pro weekend.
It's like, do I jump in feet first or baby steps?
The 8 hours at Laguna, I'd never raced Laguna before. That was my first time ever racing at Laguna, was the 8-hour Intercontinental race. So, yeah, there's something wrong with me. One of my friends has said, "You're not afraid to just go after something, are you?" No.
I'm kind of the same way. It's like as soon as I'm at a track or somewhere new, it's like, let's just go at it. Every track's the same. It has a straightaway, left and right corners. I'll figure it out.
Yeah, some are easier than others. I mean, until this year, VIR had kind of been my nemesis. Getting those uphill S's flat in a GT4 car is such a challenge. You don't have, the benefit of all the aero of a GT3 car, but yet you've got enough power to make it really hairy. As we hit that last curb on the right before you're at the top of the hill, you're spinning the tires over that bump, and the car's moving around, and it's really hairy.
For me, it's like turn 2, turn 3 complex at Watkins Glen, or even coming down the S's.
Yeah. See, because that's kind of one of my home tracks from being in New Jersey. I love that place. Like, it's just
don't get me wrong. I love Watkins Glen. It's definitely my top 5 tracks of all time in the U.S. But again, it's one of those tracks that, without having the proper seat time there, it can become very hairy very quick.
Oh, I mean, the first time I went to Watkins Glen was in a spec Boxster, and I had a buddy showing me the way around, and he's telling me you have to be flat through turn 2 and all the way up the S's. And I'm coming around the track, and I come out of 1, and I'm foot's on the floor, and I'm looking at 2 coming at me, and I'm going, there's no effing way. So, yeah, but eventually you get there, and it's like, okay, the car moves around a little, but it doesn't go anywhere. I'm just going to keep my foot in it.
Exactly.
But getting to that point is definitely a challenge. Like, every piece of your being is saying you're going to hurt yourself if you don't lift.
No, absolutely. So
we wrapped up the 2019 season second in the East Championship, and then this season made the big shift. I bought a 718 Club Sport with my partner and founded OGH Motorsports. So Sam Owen and I did that, and we wanted to have the car closer to us. As much as I love TRG and Kevin, having the car in California and me being in Texas meant it was impossible to practice and be able to get the car to the races. So, Jason Hart, if you know Jason, lives about
Jason's a
4 miles from me.
past guest on the show, and so I don't want to spoil anything, but I don't think you could have picked a wrong team to go with here. Working with Jason and John.
Look, Jason is such a good coach. For anybody out there that's working, to become a driver at this level, having somebody like Jason that can help you progress and set such a high bar and help you. How do you work the data? How do you work the vehicle dynamics? How do you learn to set up the car based upon what you're doing? Amazing at that. An amazing underrated driver. I mean, you look at his pace against some of the best guys in the world, and he's right there. I don't think he gets the credit he deserves.
Absolutely.
And then, John is such a quiet, easygoing, laid-back guy, but does such an amazing job. I mean, that team and the car that I had every time it got unloaded at every race this year was phenomenal. The team's preparation, their readiness, Scott Best, our engineer, the car comes off the trailer better than most cars finish the weekend, and it just keeps getting better. He's the only guy, between John and the whole team and Scott, every time we give feedback on the car, it oversteers on exit, but it pushes on in the middle of the corner. Somehow Scott fixes both, when every other engineer I've worked with is like, I can fix one or the other.
Give me a choice. Which one do you want?
Right. And the other part of that is the whole group of folks. So Matt Travis, who drove, the last couple of years with Jason, is a guy that I raced a ton with in Spec Boxster. So we've been friends before the season, and to be able to go off this season and spend the whole time with people that are friends and enjoy being together. And then, my co-driver, Zach Anderson, such a talented driver. I mean, the guy is just so fast, and to have those three people who are so good in the car that are setting that bar, it really helped me raise my level of performance in the car, because you have this amazing benchmark that you just have to go, well, if they can do it, I can do it.
No, exactly. And it's like, wait, I don't want to be the last one holding everybody back. So, I'm stepping up my game too.
Yeah. And, they made it easy, right? They'd set the benchmark, but they were great teammates in helping you figure out how to get there, and really helping the whole season go along. And absolutely incredible season, right? We win 8 out of 13 races. We finish every single race on the podium. We win the championship 3 races early. Was how kind of amazing and fortunate our experience was there. So we didn't even race at Indianapolis because we didn't have the budget to put the car on track. Thankfully, we didn't have to because we'd already locked up the championship.
And was the championship was locked up? Wasn't that at Coda?
When we made the minimum drive time to score points in the first race at Coda, it was locked up.
Yep. So again, you got to lock up your championship at your home track, at your favorite track.
Yeah.
So you couldn't have asked for a better, rookie ownership year.
No, we couldn't. And, we couldn't do that without the partnership with NOLA, but we also got to do it in a way. We had a brand new sponsor, Stewart Title, there. They had guests there, so we were able to bring the guests up on the podium for the race wins and, get them to be able to hear us win the championship and be part of that. And we're really looking forward to them being back with us for this 2021 season.
That's amazing. So yes, we're talking to the 2020 Sprint X-Am champion, Sean Gibbons. So now that we've completed, kind of your racing history and everything, let's talk about the most important part about racing. And that's the money. Because without the money, we can't run, we can't race. What has been the strongest thing for you? Because you've done well with being able to get sponsors to come on and help fund it, and being able to back there. And, you always treat your sponsors and your partners so well throughout the different race weekends on, whether it's a local race for them or whatnot. What are the tips and tricks they can give to people listening that want to talk to a business about proving the ROI, and besides just saying, I'll slap your name on the side of my car?
I'm very, very fortunate in that, I've had a long business career, and Sirius's business is so diverse. I've started in business development. I've established and run our product organization. I now run our automotive product and engineering. I have 500 people that work for me. The relationships, the contacts, the companies, the people that we get to deal with open so many doors for me. But that you can build that through footwork. It's just work. The thing you have to really begin to understand and think about differently is you have to think and understand the business side of your sponsors. What matters to them? Why does it matter to them? How can I help them achieve their business goals? If you don't understand the fundamentals of their business and what matters to them, you won't be successful, whether that's being a brand ambassador for them. We do a bunch this year with Recaro. We understand their product line. We can talk to you about the safety, the comfort, the technology that goes into the seat. And for Recaro, that's got a value to them. When we talk to, I had a sponsor last year, Pastime GPS Solutions, that makes these modules for the car market that really are around the banks and the finance companies. And, because what happens is if you're a subprime, car buyer, you can't really get a loan. The bank will give you the loan, but you have to put this module in the car at time of purchase so that if you don't make your payments, they can shut the car off remotely. You get a text message that says, hey, click this link to make your payment. We'll turn your car back on. For them, the finance company recovers 80% more of their revenue than if they have to repo the car. So I can go out and build a package that says, okay, you need to meet car dealers because that's who's going to sell and install this for their finance companies. Let's go invite the principal of target all the car dealers in the market we're going to. What are the best opportunities? And we go invite all the principals to come to the race weekend and put them together with the sales guy from that company. Same thing, this year with Stewart, they're interested in people that are buying and selling commercial and residential properties. How do we connect them with the people that are in those businesses, either commercial real estate or home buyers, and how do we help build their brand? The other part of it for them is they want to be able to entertain their existing employees and their existing customers. And so we build events, and you've seen some of what we do where, you come out, somebody greets you, we pick you up in the parking lot in a golf cart, you have your own team's golf cart. We do, fun events. We did a driver change challenge where the Stewart people, actually got to go through and compete in pairs trying to beat each other's driver change practice times, right? So just fun stuff that they're interested in. We have a photographer that shoots all that. We have a videographer, and when they leave, they get all of those images. They get a video that's made for them. They just have a great time.
Yeah. So, and that's key, is that these businesses, it's not what it used to be where, racing was on ABC, CBS, NBC on a Saturday and Sunday with millions and millions of viewers. Everybody's kind of gone to the live stream or secondary channels now. And it's not, you can't just churn ROI based on, oh, I'm going to hit X amount of people by putting the name of your company on the side of my car now. Like you said, there's so much more to it, like, interacting with them, putting them in the place with the right people. And ROI is going to be your biggest thing when it comes to getting somebody to want to put their name on the side of the car.
Yeah, and it's never one facet, right? To get the ROI, the branding on the side of the car is the least valuable asset that you have.
Absolutely.
And so how do you build a package? In the case of, we have a sponsor, Trattori Wines, right? By the way, if you drink wine, go to their website. It's, Trattori Farms, and order a little bit to see what it's like. But they win all these awards. They're amazing. The other thing they make is they make olive oil. And if you like to cook, their olive oil, we just use some tonight. I'll grill asparagus, and they have this Meyer lemon olive oil that you put over the asparagus. Oh, it's amazing. Or their jalapeno oil on your eggs in the morning is just incredible. But for them, it's about exposing people all around the country to their wines and olive oil. So, we do events where people are tasting the olive oil. We do wine dinners where the drivers come to the dinners, and, we talk about the wines with the people we're sitting with and all of that stuff, and, look to get people to actually engage. And when they enjoy the product, sign up for their wine club.
Exactly.
And, that's a very direct activation, where we have other things that are more, long lead sales. How do we match up, an LED commercial lighting company with other big companies and get the facilities people for, big companies like Best Buy or Target to come to the events, so that they can get that opportunity.
Yeah. Sean, that is such, I appreciate that so much. And I'm so thankful that you're able to share this with our listeners, because I know there's a lot of drivers out there that are like, how do I really understand sponsorship? What do I do? That's one of the things I'm actually working on right now, because I've been talking with somebody about actually doing Carrera Cup next year. So it's not cheap, but
Okay.
So, racing Carrera Cup's not cheap, but what racing is. So it's like, I'm doing all my marketing packets and putting all that stuff together right now for myself. But, being able to hear it from, you, and, you're able to bring on another past guest as one of your sponsors later in the year at Sonoma with Porsche Fresno.
Yeah.
And, CJ Wilson.
CJ, CJ's such a great person. He came on, at Road America for us, and we wouldn't have been able to run Road America without him coming on. And he's got the same passion that, we have for the sport. He wants to come back racing and do those things. And he spent the last few years building his car dealership businesses out there in California. And so I hope we're going to be able to do more with him because, we share that same passion and goal, and share that, very different successes, right? Him, an all-star MLB pitcher, and now a very successful car dealership owner.
Yeah.
Me on the side of, successful in a very unique business, but related to that car business, because that's what we do, right? We put that. Having been able to have him be part of us winning that championship. Oh, you're back.
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
I got you. So, yeah, winning the championship, especially with CJ, hopefully it does carry on next year for you guys. And I know that being teamed up again, with NOLA Sport, if that's, where you're going with Jason and, Matt Travis, you guys are destined for even more success. And, Zach Anderson is this young up and coming driver, like you said, fast and knows where to put the car.
Oh, and so good on the car. I mean, he never, damaged the car. He's so good on the tires. There's all of that strategy of making sure you give your teammate a good car part of it. And, my business partner in this, Sam Owen, is going to come racing next year too. So, we've got a program that's growing, and we love our relationship with NOLA Sport and, the whole team.
Yeah, no, John was always one of, like, when I'd be at the races with, the old company and on my professional working level, always enjoyed stopping, visiting with John and his guys and seeing Jason. I'd come see you at the PCA races when you guys were there.
Yep.
So yeah, it's definitely, I don't think you guys could have teamed up with a better team out there. So,
yeah, I mean, the on-track performance certainly shows it.
No, absolutely. And so, Sean, I do want to for your time tonight. I know you're doing it a little bit after dinner here and there because of our little time difference. But, as it is in racing, when you're at the top of the podium, there's been so many people that, as you've shared, helped you get here. And again, this is your time. I want you to take and show your appreciation for, partners, sponsors, and whoever you need to show appreciation to.
Look, I appreciate that. I think, as we've talked, I've talked about so many of them. The only other ones I didn't really give as much credit as they deserve, are Sam and Lisa Owen, who, Sam's my business partner in OGH Motorsports, but supported this season in a way that I know he wasn't expecting. COVID, was a big challenge on the sponsorship side this year. And then, of course, my wife and kids, because, for Sirius, last year I spent 100 nights a year in hotels for work. And when you put the racing on top of that, it's just more time away.
Yeah. And, they do take the suffering, but it's also nice when, once COVID's over and travel restrictions are a little bit more lenient, to be able to come and hang back out at the track with you.
Oh, I mean, look, there's very few things in life where, when you have a 10 or 11-year-old boy and a 6-year-old boy, that you can go take them up on the podium after winning a pro race and, have them see the trophy and the champagne and kind of be an even bigger hero to them than you already are, is just an amazing feeling.
I have a 6-year-old. He's ready to start learning how to drive go-karts, and he says he wants to be a firefighter so he can work at the racetracks to make sure I don't get hurt. So, but Sean, thank you so much again for your time today. Congratulations on the 2020 championship for you and Zach. And also, where can people go find you and follow you? And
yeah, you can follow us at OGH Motorsports on Facebook or Twitter. You can follow me at Sean Gibbons Motorsports on Facebook. Instagram, same thing. And we've got a new website for OGH Motorsports that we'll be launching in the next couple of weeks. It'll be oghmotorsports.com. And follow us on our YouTube channel, OGH Motorsports. We try and post a lot of interesting stuff. I'm going to post some videos shortly that you didn't get to see on the TV coverage from this season, like my last corner pass on Sean Quinlan that we almost both end up in the wall that nobody got to see, and some other things like that. So
that's awesome. Sean, again, thank you for your time. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Uber to the Pits. Also on YouTube, Uber to the Pits. If you have any questions or you want to have any insight to possible guests you'd like to have on the show, info@ubertothepits.com. Sean, I can't thank you enough, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Chris.
All right. Thanks, Sean.
Talk to you, bud. Bye.
All right. Bye.